The Willowbrook Municipal Library was a hidden gem in the sleepy town. The gray stone building, with its majestic columns and tall windows, evoked an aura of knowledge and history. Sarah, a college student with a passion for books, found comfort in the serenity of the library. Her days were filled with pages and pages of novels, mysteries, and literary adventures. It was an autumn afternoon, the cloudy sky casting shadows over the bookshelves. Sarah was engrossed in an old volume she had found in the rarities section. The yellowed pages and the characteristic smell of old books enveloped her as she immersed herself in the plot of mystery. Time seemed to disappear as Sarah devoted herself to reading, her mind absorbed by the printed words. She barely noticed when the sun hid behind the thick clouds and the library's surroundings became darker. It was as if she was isolated in her own literary world. It was then that something broke the silence. A soft, barely audible whisper echoed through the halls, like a murmur of shadows. Sarah looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. The library was almost empty, and her voice seemed to have no origin, as if it were coming from the dusty shelves themselves. The whispering continued, subtle, as if secret words were being whispered directly into her ears. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The voice, despite being almost inaudible, seemed filled with urgency and a touch of mystery. She closed the book and looked around, her curiosity now on high alert. However, there was no one around. The halls were empty, and the library seemed quiet, as always. Sarah shook her head, trying to shake off the feeling that something strange was happening. She returned to her book, but the whispering persisted, as if the very walls of the library were trying to tell her a dark secret. As the murmuring continued, Sarah began to feel a presence around her, as if something or someone was watching her. She glanced nervously over her shoulder, but the library was still empty. It was impossible to determine the source of the unsettling whisper. She tried to ignore the feeling of restlessness that came over her and immersed herself in reading again. But the whisper continued, becoming clearer and more insistent with each passing moment. It was as if the words were getting closer to her, as if they wanted to be heard. Sarah could no longer concentrate on the book. Her curiosity turned to apprehension, and her heart beat faster. She wondered if she should investigate the source of the whisper, or if it was just her imagination luring her into an illusion of fear. However, as the whisper became clearer, Sarah couldn't resist the temptation to unravel the riddle the library hid. With a feeling of apprehension, she stood up, closed the book, and began to follow the sound of the whispering, which seemed to come from the depths of the library, where the shelves stretched into silent darkness. Sarah advanced through the silent library, guided by the mysterious whisper that seemed to intensify with every step she took. The darkness that spread before her contrasted with the soft light that still filtered through the tall windows. As she approached the far corner of the library, where the shelves were older and dustier, the whispering became almost audible. It was as if the words wanted to be heard, as if they were eager to tell their story. Finally, Sarah stopped in front of an old book with a worn leather cover and yellowed pages. The title was almost faded, but she could make out the words, "The Shadow Pact." A chilling sensation ran down her spine as she stared at the enigmatic cover. Sarah hesitated for a moment, but curiosity and the feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen drove her forward. She reached out and opened the old book, revealing its yellowed pages. The moment the book was opened, an icy wind swept through the room, extinguishing the nearby candles and plunging everything into darkness. Sarah tried to turn on her flashlight, but nothing happened. She was alone in the darkness, except for the whispering that was now clearer than ever. The whispered words were not in English, but in Latin, a language Sarah did not understand. She felt as if the words had a life of their own, as if they were dancing around her. The voice, now clearer, was mesmerizing and frightening. As she tried to understand what was happening, Sarah felt something brush against her shoulder, something cold and slimy. She jumped and turned around quickly, but there was no one there. The feeling that something was watching her intensified, becoming almost unbearable. Sarah tried to close the book, but her hands seemed glued to the pages. She pulled hard, but it was useless. The book held her captive, and the whisper continued, more and more insistent. Desperately, Sarah looked at the yellowed pages in front of her, trying to understand what was written in Latin. The words seemed to take on a life of their own, forming images and scenes in his mind. She felt like she was being dragged into the book itself, as if she was being pulled into a distorted reality. The darkness around her seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. She saw shadows moving in the corner of her eye and heard ghoulish laughter echoing in the distance. Sarah was trapped in a nightmare she couldn't understand, struggling to free herself from the pages of the book that had swallowed her. The whisper of her voice continued to mesmerize her, the Latin words circling around her like venomous snakes. She felt lost in a maze of terror, not knowing how or if she could find a way out. And as the book held her captive, Sarah realized she was facing something far beyond her understanding, something that would take her on a dark and terrifying journey into the depths of the unknown. Sarah was enveloped in suffocating darkness, immersed in the pages of the mysterious book. The Latin words, which seemed to dance around her, continued to whisper in her mind, becoming clearer and more unsettling with each passing moment. She tried desperately to fight her grip on the book, but her hands seemed glued to the yellowing pages. As Sarah struggled, she felt something grab her ankle, something cold and slimy. She looked down and saw skeletal hands emerging from the pages of the book, reaching towards her. A scream of horror escaped her lips, but her hands pulled her into the pages of the book. She found herself immersed in a distorted and surreal reality. Sarah was in the center of an endless library, surrounded by shelves that stretched to infinity. The shelves were filled with dark books, each with its own unsettling whisper. The words that were once just whispers were now deafening screams in his mind. She felt lost in a maze of dark corridors and cursed books. Dark creatures and menacing figures lurked in the shadows, watching her with glowing, hungry eyes. Sarah tried to scream, but her voice was lost in the cacophony of sounds around her. She realized that she was trapped in the pages of a macabre story, where nightmares and reality mixed in a terrifying way. The voice that whispered her was now clearer than ever, echoing in her mind like a distorted echo. She explained that Sarah was tied to the book, doomed to wander its pages forever, like a character in a dark, never-ending story. As Sarah tried to find a way out, she faced unspeakable horrors. She encountered terrifying characters, faced mysterious riddles, and disturbing twists. Each page she turned revealed a new nightmare, a new trial in her sinister path. The library felt alive, as if it had a mind of its own, wanting to hold her captive. Sarah saw books that opened by themselves, revealing disturbing images and scenes of horror. She felt the icy touch of skeletal hands that continued to reach for her, trying to pull her deeper into the pages of fear. She fought monstrous creatures that emerged from the books and deciphered riddles that led her down increasingly dark paths. With each challenge overcome, Sarah felt that she was getting a little closer to a way out, a way to break the book's control over her. But the voice, which became more desperate by the moment, tried to keep her trapped in the shadows of the book. She whispered promises of eternal nightmares and dark secrets, trying to persuade Sarah to give up her quest for freedom. However, Sarah was determined and courageous. She knew her only hope was to find a way to rewrite history, to undo the dark pact that kept her prisoner. Every page turned, every challenge faced, brought her closer to a final confrontation with the entity that held the book's final secret, and she was willing to face any terror to regain her freedom. Sarah was determined to break the control of the cursed book and escape the pages of fear. She faced countless horrors and challenges throughout her journey within the never-ending library. Each twist was more terrifying than the last, but his courage did not waver. As Sarah progressed through the pages of the book, she began to notice a pattern in the trials she faced. Each challenge was related to a moral choice, a harrowing dilemma. She had to make difficult decisions that tested her empathy, compassion, and courage. In one of the challenges, she found herself in front of a magic mirror that reflected her worst fear. She had to face the image of herself, weakness and insecurity, overcoming the self-criticism that haunted her. It was a painful test, but Sarah emerged stronger and more confident. Another challenge led her to choose between her own safety and that of a stranger in danger. She chose to help the stranger, even if it put her in danger. This choice made her realize the importance of sacrificing herself for the good of others. The voice that whispered to her with each challenge became more desperate and impatient. She tried to convince Sarah to give up, to accept her imprisonment in the pages of the book as inevitable. But Sarah remained steadfast in her determination to find a way out. Finally, after an epic confrontation with a terrible entity that kept the book's last secret, Sarah managed to find the answer she was looking for. She realized that the true power of the book was in its ability to influence choices and decisions. It was a moral testing tool, designed to challenge and transform those who dared enter its pages. With one last handwritten word, Sarah broke the dark pact that kept her prisoner. She felt a tremor run through the library, the shelves shaking and the books shaking. The whisper that had haunted her for so long faded, as if sucked into the book. When Sarah woke up, she was back in the Willowbrook Municipal Library, holding the now empty and silent book. She was in a room lit by the afternoon sun, and the quiet of the library was almost comforting after her terrifying experiences. However, Sarah knew that what she had experienced was not just a dream or hallucination. She had faced a real nightmare within the pages of the cursed book, a journey that tested her courage and morals. The library, which used to be her refuge, was now remembered as the place where she faced her worst fears, trapped in the pages of terror. Since that day, Sarah has never entered the library again. She refused to reveal to others what happened there, afraid that others might be drawn in by the book's power. She knew that the evil she had faced was real, and the cursed book mysteriously disappeared, as if it had never existed. The experience left a deep mark on Sarah, who now saw the world from a different perspective. She knew that evil could hide in the most unexpected places, and the line between reality and nightmare was thinner than she had ever imagined. The library that used to be her refuge had become a constant reminder that the unknown and unexplored could hide dark secrets, waiting to be revealed.